lockdown, and we are in our second lockdown in the UK. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the host for today, which is Craig, who's one of my colleagues. He heads up the o2h Technology Business Unit, and he's assembled a great panel for you, which I'm looking at right now. And so I will hand over to Craig.
Thank you very much, Sunil. Short and sweet. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's actually our 20th ChaiTime webinar today. It does only feel like yesterday, actually, since I did my last one. But I was looking back through the YouTube VODs, and I actually did ChaiTime number 3. So that was quite a long time ago. Reminder to everyone, if you go on YouTube, search for o2h Group, you'll be able to go back, view all 20, all 19 of the previous ones. I know Thanksgiving break is coming up for my American friends, and for my American friends living in the UK. I can think of no better way on Thanksgiving to watch 19 hours of the finest life science, tech, investment, thought leadership that you've ever seen. So have a great time. Check us out on YouTube. It's going to be really, really interesting. And this VOD will go up on YouTube later on today. Anyway, today we're going to be discussing technology, particularly how technology solutions are continuing to transform healthcare. With everything that's been going on in the world this year, technology has proven once again that it can continue to empower people to act normally. Lockdown, not affected by technology whatsoever. It's the powerhouse. And that's why I really thought now was a good time to talk about health tech. And today we're going to be focusing on particular who the pioneers were. We're going to be looking at who the current champions are. And hopefully my panelists will share with you a couple of their businesses, because they really are the champions right now. And finally, we're going to look towards the future of healthcare, what treatment pathways are really in need of a little bit of modernization. So that's the basic structure for today's ChaiTime. Hopefully you'll have a great discussion. Please use the Q&A function, use the chat function. If you've got any questions, put them in there. I encourage you to do so, and we'll answer them. I've got 3 great leaders joining me today from the world of health tech, sci-tech, and health tech investment. They all share my passion for transformative healthcare, which is great. So without further ado, let me pass the floor over to those guys. If you could just all do a very quick introduction to yourself, that would be fantastic. Toby, perhaps you can kick us off.
Yeah, very happy to. So I'm the non-scientist on the group, so the least equipped probably to talk about medtech. My background is as an investment banker, 18 years at Deutsche Bank, and then 6 years focused on kind of China cross-border M&A with a Chinese investment bank. I'm also a long-term angel investor, so that was kind of the beginning of my interest in early-stage companies. I have teamed up with a long-term friend of mine who is a medtech entrepreneur with a couple of exits in medtech. And we joke and say that we no longer do any solo albums. So we tend to work together on projects because our skills are very complementary. And essentially, we started by helping companies fundraising, and we also helped with a turnaround and some work in China for joint ventures for companies. But actually what we decided was it's much more rewarding to start your own companies, not only from a financial perspective, but from a kind of reward perspective and the influence you can have on a business. So there's a couple of companies that I'm particularly involved in at the moment. One is Scuba TX, which is an organ preservation business. We recently spun out of Newcastle University. And effectively what we've done is use computer science to take a technique called persiflation out of the laboratory and into a device that can be commercialized. So it's as easy as this static cold storage, which is the kind of ice box for organs, but it has the same efficacy as the very expensive systems which you see around the world today. It also happens to be the only device we think that can preserve pancreas effectively, which is one of the potential treatments for diabetes out there. The second business, which is also very exciting, is Vitail. Essentially, people have digitized the interface between clinicians and patients, and they've even digitized the interface between clinicians and clinicians to help them consult with each other. But what hasn't been digitized yet, and is still slightly in the dark ages, is the interface between the healthcare companies and the clinicians. So these people, they need support, they need education about products, they need in the moment support, and also it's an interface for innovation between that dialogue. So we've developed a platform which enables, a bit like LinkedIn meets FaceTime meets WhatsApp, purely for that interface. And we're launching that on the 4th of January next year. Both companies, as most startups are fundraising at the moment. And so happy to talk to any kind of angel investors or early stage VCs about their interest in either of those two spaces.
Thank you very much, Toby. Good plug as well. We like it. Please plug as much as you can. That's what we're here for. Natalia, perhaps you can go next.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So first of all, I would like to say that it's a great pleasure to join this panel today, especially on such a hot topic like this technology in healthcare. So it's very relevant, and it's obvious that it's transforming our lives. So hi, everyone. I'm Natalia Mateo. I'm the CEO of PharmaEnable and one of the co-founders. My background is purely scientist, so I'm organic and medicinal chemistry by background. So I've got over 15 years experience in different stages of early drug discovery in different programs. I've worked across different academic institutions and pharma companies before we founded PharmaEnable. So a bit more of PharmaEnable. So we are an early stage drug discovery company using advanced medicinal chemistry and AI, artificial intelligence, to develop the next generation of small molecule drugs. So at PharmaEnable, we are very focused on using technology, in particular AI and machine learning techniques, to understand better the chemical space. So chemical space is a very abstract concept. So it refers to the space defined by all possible drug-like molecules, and it's been estimated to be an astronomical number. So we are talking about 10 to the 60 potential drug-like molecules. So at PharmaEnable, what we do is we use AI technologies in combination with our medicinal chemistry expertise to efficiently explore this chemical space and populate it with complex and three-dimensional small molecules or potential drugs against challenging biological targets or the well-known undruggable targets that are now appearing in the scene of drug discovery. And we recently, in May, during the pandemic, we closed our seed round for 1.8 million for start working on different partnerships so we can have the ownership of the asset that we are generating and start our own pipeline. So yeah, very excited to be part of these discussions.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Very exciting, and congratulations on the fundraising close.
Thank you.
It's always a big milestone. Speaking of fundraising, Stephanie, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and o2h?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Craig. It's really fun to be here with all of you. And yeah, so Craig knows that I'm currently fundraising at the moment. Hopefully, most of the way there. But yeah, it's certainly good fun and meeting lots of interesting people and getting lots of great ideas. So my background is as an optometrist. I have worked in the NHS at least part-time for 10 years. I'm also a trained vision scientist. So I'm, really passionate about, how can we bring the best of what vision science has to offer and get that into our patients' hands. And the reason why I'm doing that, and that's really the core of what we do at o2h, is because we believe that everybody deserves access to great eye care. And when I think about what great eye care is, for me, the absolute cornerstone of that is an on-time treatment. So in order for us to get patients the treatments that they need on time, ideally what we want to do is monitor those patients at home rather than having to bring them into hospital every time that we want to monitor how someone's doing. So at o2h, we develop smartphone software that's basically little really easily accessible video games, and you play the video games. Those are embedded with vision science, and from looking at how people interact with those video games, we can tell how they see the world. And so what we're doing is looking for small patterns changes in how people interact with our apps, so that we can monitor the vision over time, detect when that vision is changing at the earliest possible opportunity, and get patients the treatment that they need.
Great stuff. It's certainly a business very close to my heart as a video games entrepreneur myself. And you may have noticed these things on my head, vision science meet video games, brilliant, absolutely in my bag. So Sunil introduced me at the beginning of the call. I'm Craig, I'm the CTO of o2h Group. I head up o2h Technology. Me and my team help create software solutions for clients all over the world. So if anyone has any projects they're interested in discussing, shoot me a message on LinkedIn, let's connect and let's chat tech. I'm an economist by training, but I've spent the past 12, 13 years now in digital health, medical devices, mHealth, and SciTech. So that's why I'm really, really excited to be chairing today's panel. So look, we've been talking a lot about digital health. It's the topic of today's discussion. What do we actually mean by digital health? It's a simple but often misguided concept. It's all about using technology to help improve an individual's health and well-being, basically. It's a really broad, growing sector. It includes everything from wearables like your smartwatch to ingestibles, which are growing quite rapidly at the minute. You've got mobile apps like Stephanie was mentioning, artificial intelligence solutions. It even includes things like robotic carers and electronic data records. So it is very, very broad. It's about applying digital transformation through disruptive technologies in order to bring about a cultural and adapting change to the healthcare sector. It's really, really exciting. It's really, really close to my heart and my passion. With that in mind then, let's start by looking at the past. And just if we could, as a collective panel, what was your first introduction to digital health? And I'll share a very quick story to get us started on this one. In the mid-90s, I must have been about 6 or 7 years old. About 1994, 1995, around that time. I was probably about 7. I had a problem with high blood pressure. It was an undiagnosed kidney problem. But anyway, I'd go into the GP, get the blood pressure tests, all of that thing. It was all very antiquated. But one day, my GP said to me, she really wanted to try something new. And she pulled out this really clunky looking wristwatch. This was amazing to me, like 7-year-old geeky kid obsessed with sci-fi. Like I love this thing, and it strapped onto my arm, and it was a portable blood pressure monitor that would basically take readings after exercise, and it'd take readings after eating, and it was looking for triggers at the time. I love this thing. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I did some research because I remembered this big Panasonic device that I had strapped to my arm. And there was a huge public backlash against it in the 90s because this thing cost a huge amount of money. And everybody was saying, why are they spending money on this? Why are people not just using the normal kits? They cost £20. You get a reading there. People didn't see the benefits. This was providing real-time analysis. They just looked at the cost. They saw that it cost £20,000 and they thought, this is ridiculous. It was a big, big barrier that slowed down the adoption. And we'll come on to that a little bit later. That's my story. That was the first time I was introduced to digital health. And it was in the 90s, which was a crazy time. I'm sure you'll all agree. Natalia, have you got any sort of stories? What was your introduction to digital health?
Yeah, so I'm not gonna maybe talk about my first interaction with digital health because I can't remember when that was, but I do remember when it was that I was very, very impressive and surprised about the power of technologies in particular in drug discovery. So I'm going to come back to my early days in my academic career where I was doing some research, I can't remember where, so maybe doing some things in the lab, some chemistry in the lab, mixing some reagents and so on. And during this project, I remember that I understood at some point the potential of having data, existing experimental data, and the capability to train machines to generate models that are able to predict properties, biological activities, side effects for particular drugs. And I think it was, a while ago, but I've never used that before during my entire career. And I was very, very surprised and impressed about the potential of having a machine or a model that can be trained with all this experimental data that we are generating data all the time. So all this data can be used in a very smart way to make the process, for example, in drug discovery, more efficient, more help with the decision-making process in order to guide the next step in your research, which is going to be. And I'm not saying it's going to be like the best solution or the final solution to all our problems, but I think it's a very powerful tool to be able to train a machine to help you with your decision-making process. And I think that was the first time I realized that the potential of machine learning, artificial intelligence in drug discovery. So that's my story.
No, thank you for sharing. It's a very, very valid and on-trend point. Stephanie, how about you? When were you first sort of introduced to the world of digital health?
I think the first time, I mean, I got obsessed with TED Talks. You know, when I was working at a hospital in Cardiff, and there was a really amazing professor there who used to send them to those of us who were working, and there was one on eye care, which I remember thinking, wow, you know, imagine that idea that you can begin to do eye care away from the hospital, and that was a very basic sort of system, but it allowed, you know, data image transfer across countries. And I just remember thinking, like, if you could harness the power of people who were, you know, in different countries in order to analyze things, and, you know, for example, x-rays that were being taken in Australia but being analyzed in the UK overnight and then sent back, for me, that I think it was those sort of ideas that were extremely powerful in thinking about doing things differently. But I should probably tell you why we started doing what we did. And that was very much led by accident, by a patient of mine who came in, and he did not want to have his eyes tested that day. And he was a young boy. He also had, as well as having really thick glasses, he also had Down syndrome. And he was a really cheeky chappy, and he didn't want to have his eyes tested. He had fed up because he was playing, you know, video games out in the waiting room. And when he came in to see me, there was no way that he wanted to look at these like gray cards that I had, and I was trying to measure his vision with these pictures. And he had spotted my iPad on the shelf. And so when I wasn't looking, he grabbed this iPad down, and he didn't have his thick glasses on, but he could see what the YouTube icon was. So he clicked on YouTube, but then once he got in, he couldn't quite see what he was looking for. And I think that taught me that actually what we could do is use the observation of, well, what did somebody interact with and what did they not interact with to see. And I thought, well, how much time would it save me if, rather than trying to persuade this kid who totally didn't want to have his eyes tested to play a video game that happened to test his eyes, that would just have saved me a lot of time and effort, and also would have made things a lot less painful for him. And so I think for me, the thing about digital health that I find so inspiring is that, you know, it gives us the opportunity to wrap healthcare around what people do anyway and like to do. So I think that's where certainly my introduction and where the passion really came from around patients, which is, you know, what it should be.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's about accessibility. I think that's the key thing. If we can make, because let's be honest, nobody likes going to their GP. Nobody likes doing these things. Nobody likes going to a hospital. I'm sure there's some people that do, but in general, it's about accessibility. It's about bringing treatment to the patient, which again is a really, really, really good way of how technology can help people in these very strange times. Toby, any stories to share?
Well, my experience, actually, I've only been in healthcare for a couple of years in the broader space, but actually I didn't realize it was healthcare. But my first interest in, I guess, kind of digital monitoring of health was through sports, being quite a keen cyclist, and with the advent of Strava and then Zwift, where you collect a lot of personal health data through your activities, and you use that to try and get better, sometimes in a competitive way against your friends. And, you know, having for 5 or 6, 7 years probably been collecting that data and kind of analyzing your power output compared to your heart rate and things like that over time, began to realize the value of kind of the digital collection of data about your health. Actually, and then in the last couple of years, that's turned into more serious applications where we've looked at investing in platforms that use digital technology to bring new medical products to market. One of our local companies, SideHealth, which is an imaging company that gives you a 3D image while you're operating in the operating theatre, we invested in that company quite early on, seeing the potential for how that could revolutionize surgery. And we're also involved in a business that scans people's bodies, in particular at the moment legs, and can create a bespoke compression stocking for people with problems with venous return, diabetics, etc. So we've got quite deeply embedded in a number of companies where digital opportunities are revolutionizing the way people offer treatment.
That's, it's again part of that, bringing people together, making essentially data that you were never aware of accessible. It's again such a great value of tech in this space. So sticking with you, Toby, I'm sure you mentioned a couple of companies there. I'm sure you get exposed to a lot more companies in the digital health space. Can you just tell us a little bit more about Vitel, for example,
Yep.
how that opportunity came about, and what the market need was when you were looking at investing and being a part of that company?
Yeah, actually, Vitel's an incredibly interesting story, because if you're a med tech investor, you realize how long these are from kind of inception to getting to market in terms of developing a product, testing it, building devices, going through regulatory approvals. It turns out that SaaS or software as a service is a lot quicker to market and much more scalable, we've discovered. So actually the technology itself is not new. We rely on existing platforms, other things people have developed. But it was the clever idea, which our founder had, Barry, in the US. Now, he's been running medical device companies and specializing in wound care for the last couple of decades. And one of the things running sales teams he realized about 10 years ago was that it's very inefficient for a salesman to fly across the US, stay in a hotel, have a meeting with a doctor about selling him a product, and then flying all the way back. And he said, why can't we do this virtually, or can't use FaceTime? And there was a lot of pushback from the sales rep. He said, no, this is how it's done. And that access is well documented, that you can't go to Hawaii anymore. You have to disclose if someone buys you a sandwich. And that access for sales reps into doctors has been declining for a couple of decades anyway. And then when COVID hit, no hospitals wanted a sales rep anywhere near the hospital, and no sales rep wanted to go into hospitals. And so that interface, which is really important for the reasons I said earlier in terms of innovation, product development, just in the moment, is this the right product with this patient I'm sitting with, has been really hard to achieve. So he had the idea and said, well, actually, if there's ever going to be a time, now is the time to do that. So we started looking around, and we couldn't find anybody doing that. I mean, huge amounts of money have gone into Babylon Health and Teladoc and all these companies. And even in the UK, there's some amazing companies that are doctor to doctor. But nobody had, it's a bit like inventing the wheel, nobody had actually thought to digitize this space. Now, part of the problem is a doctor's not going to have an app for every healthcare company. So, he's not going to want to have a Smith & Nephew app and a 3M app. So you need to have one app that will serve all of those companies and create a community, kind of a network effect. And a lot of doctors in a hospital will say, oh my God, I'm just about to use this product, but I have a question. Does anyone know who our rep is that covers this company? But actually, if you can just click on your phone and go scan the product, or just say, where's my 3M contact, and hit a button. And if your contact can't answer, it goes through to somebody else. And if you want to do it by phone, that's fine. Or you want to do it by video, if you're with the patient, then you can do it. Now, what's happened during COVID is people have been using FaceTime and WhatsApp, but that's not GDPR compliant or HIPAA compliant. So the regulators have turned a blind eye during COVID, but they know it's not going to last forever. So we started building this app. We only had the idea in March. We started building the app during the summer, putting our own money in to do it, hired some developers in Ukraine, and then quite an expensive team in London. And then we went out and started talking to customers. And we decided to focus on the US because the doctor has more of a say what products they use in the US. The UK, it tends to be kind of an NHS list you can choose from. And Barry knows the wound care space really well, so we decided to launch in that niche. And we've been to see probably 15, 20 customers so far, including Smith & Nephew, 3M, big companies like that. And we haven't had a single company yet say, no, they don't want to use this. And we haven't had a single company say someone else is doing this. So it seemed a little bit too easy to us. And we're not used to this kind of hit rate with customers. But anyway, we've lined up, probably we're going to have 15 companies on the platform for launch, and a number that will follow shortly thereafter. And we're now beta trialing with some of those customers and deciding which functionality is important to have for launch and which isn't. And we're going to offer it for free for 6 months to get people on board, to make it kind of frictionless, and then it will roll into like a subscription charge, a bit like a LinkedIn kind of pricing model.
Sure.
And so, yeah, so hopefully it will make a big difference, because actually it's, of course, it's designed to make money, but ultimately if doctors are sitting with patients and they need help in the products they're using, it will enable to do that in the moment, 15, 30-second calls to the people who know how to use the products.
It's a great example, like when I first saw it, and it's one of those instances where people are banging their head against the wall saying, there's got to be a better way, there's got to be a better way. And it's like, yeah, there is a better way. It's really obvious. You just use tech. Like, it's another one.
We're not trying to change things. People will still make flights and things like that. They'll just do it less often. So the benefits from the company side, and the doctors won't pay for this, by the way, only the healthcare companies will pay. But there's this cost saving aspect, but there's a productivity aspect as well. So so the return on what it costs for them should be anywhere between 10 and 30 times.
Exactly. It's, you know, I always hear stories, and you think that new solutions are created to solve a challenge, or somebody's identified an opportunity to do something better. And it's not like tech is here to replace the old methods. It's here to help those old methods grow and develop. That actually leads me quite nicely on to a point that I thought we could discuss, Natalia. You've got I'm going to say, classic background in medicinal organic chemistry, co-founded PharmEnable, who are a sci-tech company. But what excites me so much about PharmEnable is that you are combining those very classic approaches with AI in order to design the next generation of small molecule drugs. So talk to me a little bit about how technology is really supplementing the work that you do, and how that can sort of be improved there. And just a follow-up before you've even answered that, Michael Brown has put a really good question in the QA about, do we have any examples of how medtech is disrupting classic pharma therapeutic approaches as well? I'm not going to lay all of that on you, Natalia, but perhaps you can just comment about how tech is aiding you, and then we can tackle the next point.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think about the drug discovery process, it's a lengthy and very costly process that, you know, costs a lot of money, takes at least 12, 15 years in order to have a drug in the market. So if we go to the early stages of drug discovery, is where you have to start screening libraries, identifying molecules, testing molecules against the target of interest. So this is a costly process, because you have to create or generate thousands and millions of molecules to test against one particular target. So the point here is when we have novel biological targets that are considered as undruggable targets, because they have not been explored that in depth yet. So that is when the problem comes, because now you have to generate new libraries, new molecules, new screen collections in order to test your samples, your molecules against these novel targets. So the problem is that these screen collections hasn't been created or generated to target these novel problems, because we are talking about novel therapeutic problems. So we now have to look at the chemical space. So the chemical space, as I said before, is this estimation about all the possible drug-like molecules that have the potential to become drugs. So it's huge, it's astronomical. I mean, there's no way we can make it, we can explore it, or it's very, very difficult, it's very challenging. So if you think about the potential of AI in supporting us to explore and understand better the chemical space, it's a huge advance supplementing and combining these classical methods, because that means that you have all this pool of potential chemical structures that will become potential drugs. And by using AI and data, experimental data, all the knowledge behind, you can map the chemical space very efficiently to give the solution or the right solution against this novel problem. So the chemical space is a very complex and abstract concept. So that's why AI is ideal, because AI has the potential to digest all the information, and the output of this information is something that you're looking for. It could be properties, it could be shape, it could be whatever you want. So if you can train the model in order to give you the answer you are looking for, this is a huge advantage when we are talking about new therapeutic targets, new, not new diseases, but new proteins linked to these diseases. So this is somehow we see in drug discovery how the potential of mapping the chemical space by using these technologies is huge and can have a great impact in these early stages of drug discovery. However, we don't have to lose the human input, because this is something that the machinery is, is generating, is proposing, you got the in silico inputs from this. But at some point you have to take these molecules and make them. It's a process that you have to generate the molecules in the lab, and you have to design these molecules that you think are, the right molecules for this particular disease or these drugs. So there is where we believe that combining both, combining AI and combining our expertise or medchem expertise in the field, it's an ideal platform, it's an ideal combination in order to deliver these high quality small molecules that will have higher chances of success through the drug discovery process. And I think linked to the question about an example of where AI has had this great impact. So it's still early days, because traditional ways in drug discovery, when we're talking about generating this massive collection using combinatorial chemistry and so on, 30 years ago. Now then we have the fragment-based screening 20 years ago. So because of the lengthy process of drug discovery, we can see results from these traditional ways of identifying hits. However, it's still early days to see the impact, the real impact of AI in drug discovery. But it's true that there are many different approaches and many different nice outputs that are coming from this initial strategy. So far, we have some early drugs in the market coming from AI. So you can see the potential of implementing these technologies combined with the human expertise in order to make the process more effective. And we're talking about diseases, we're talking about drug discovery, and ultimately is patients' lives. So I think it's very important to bear in mind that AI can help a lot in changing the people's lives.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. It's not about it's about overall health is the point that I'm trying to get at. It's about therapeutics. It's about monitoring patient health and improving patient health, but also people are always going to get ill. There's always going to be that situation. So it's about how technology can facilitate that as well. Stephanie, you told us a little bit about your inspiration behind OK. Is it OK? Am I saying it correctly? I always called it OKKO, but OCO.
OCO's fine. We'll take whatever. We'll take whatever comes.
OCO it is. I was just going to ask you a little bit. We talked about the inspiration behind it. I also wanted to just talk to you a little bit about how did you start to build the business? What happened next? And Arvind Singh has put in the Q&A a question about the solution that you're building. Is it just going to be testing vision in children, or is it also going to apply to elderly patients with dementia as well? So perhaps you can tell us how you got started, and then also tell us a little bit more about OCO.
Yeah, well, interestingly, and I guess this is where sort of science and business comes together. The idea very much came from children, but actually, what we that market is small, and the truth is we couldn't get that funded initially, whether it came from private funding or public funding, and very coincidentally. It turns out that the concepts that we had for the things that we wanted to do in children, we could absolutely apply to adults. And you will know more than anybody else here, Craig, that it's not just kids who like to play computer games. And it turns out even the adults who don't really, think they like to play computer games, if you put something basic enough in front of them, and I'm one of these people, they'll actually really enjoy playing it. So we use the same techniques, which are really simple, but quite enjoyable across a range of adults' diseases that we're building out for. And I think because we come from a perspective where we're not just saying, right, well, that's how that disease is currently measured, let's put it on a phone. Lots of people do that, but what we've done is actually taken things from a vision science perspective, saying, how do we see the world, and what are the games that we can make that represent how we see the world? And because we've done that, we're able to, build a platform that can measure, because we just measure vision full stop, that's applicable to the vast majority of eye diseases. And also because of the way that we measure things, potentially, we can look at some of the neurocognitive aspects of vision, which, are really, really interesting. So we're taking, would have been an eye chart where we would get one measure of vision for each eye, instead we're producing thousands and thousands of data points. And going back to what Natalia was talking about in terms of looking for patterns and looking for things that fit, that is also very applicable to the digital health in the real world, because not everybody sees the world in the same way. And if we line up 3 different patients who will read the same line on the eye chart, they certainly don't see the world in the same way. One might be doing very well with their vision and not have any symptoms, and the other one might really be struggling. And somebody else, that eye chart might have been measuring the vision in such a way it wasn't going to pick up a disease like glaucoma, for example. And so therefore, we're trying to characterize what is that individual's fingerprint of vision that we could never have had from the eye chart, and how do we measure vision in all these different dimensions, and how do we follow that over time. So very crucially, that has a very broad application. But as Natalia was talking about, when you're using AI to look for patterns, because we're spitting out so much data, you can really begin to look for, well, how is my vision different to your vision? And what are the changes, that a particular patient might have on a day-to-day basis that makes them different to somebody whose vision changes, week to week. And when we look at when we're able to look at those levels of fluctuations, I think what we're going to find in treatment planning is that we can move towards more personalized aspects of care. So what's happened over the last 10 years is we've got some amazing new drugs in ophthalmology. I can only really speak for ophthalmology, but we've had loads of amazing new drugs. And because those drugs are very expensive, there were very, very set protocols, so you're coming back, every month or every 2 months or at set intervals, and we try and make the intervals bigger, try to make the drugs last longer. But for some people that's inappropriate, so actually, you want to be treating people when they need to be treated. And we firmly believe that different patients have different patterns. And you might have somebody who only needs a drug, every month. You might find somebody who needs the particular, dose of the drug every 2 months or every 2.5 months. And ultimately, you might be able to average it and say, okay, the average dose might be 6 times a year. But what you really want to do is treat that person, maybe it's for one person, every 3 weeks for a certain period, and then they don't need any for a while. So that drug optimization, as well as, in the pharmaceutical process that Natalia is talking about, in the clinical process, we will soon use digital health data to personalize care. And I think that's exciting, not just from the patient perspective, because we should be able to get much better outcomes, and in our case, keep people seeing the whole of their lives. But we should be able to also make that system much more effective, cost effective, for the health services. And that's really important to get that sustainability so that we can continue to use really great drugs, but do so, as cost effectively as we can.
Absolutely, yeah. Don't get me started on personalized medicine. It's my second passion in life. You talked there a lot about cost and reducing cost for the health service. And then, my little anecdote that I told at the beginning, I read afterwards that cost was what stopped Panasonic getting these mass market blood pressure monitors out there. Could you just talk to us a little bit about any of the barriers that you faced at o2h? What is currently preventing? Is it a person issue? The Q&A asked, is this meant for older patients? Could older patients use this? Talk to us a little bit about some of the barriers that you face.
Yeah, I guess one of them is, how do we get Granny to play a video game if we know that video game is a better way to test her eyes? So yeah, absolutely. So we've been, I guess the short answer is co-design. So when it comes to getting patient groups who wouldn't traditionally use our, use video games, I say video games, but it's basically straightforward puzzles. We need to design with patients. And so that user-led design process is incredibly important to us. Very early when we started, we worked with University of Bristol to really deeply understand how do we design for people, and when technology meets human, how do we make sure that interface is optimized And so, yeah, we actually spend loads of time with charities and volunteers from those charities who live with the eye diseases. And we begin to learn what interfaces do they have no problems using despite their visual impairment or despite their age, and what are the attributes that they want to see in technologies. And I think that also comes from an engagement level as well. You know, what are the things that people who are older or people who are diabetic or whatever groups like to do, and how can we fit in and make something that's built around them? And I think that's a really exciting change that we're seeing in digital health. I was listening to a webinar a couple of days ago from Bayer, and they had a really nice term called patient centricity. And I think that's what we're really beginning to see. And that's certainly at the core of what we do. Because if we have something that's digital that people don't use, well, we might as well not have it at all.
Absolutely. How do we get Granny playing games? Get Granny to design the games. It's as simple as that, guys. Get Granny on the games. Love it. Absolutely love it. Toby, I'm sure you get introduced to a lot of interesting, exciting opportunities in the digital health space. Perhaps you'd be willing to share with us, outside of Scuba, TX and VTEL, which are very hot. You know, I've seen them both. Very, very hot indeed. Well, what else is hot right now in the world of health tech?
Well, thanks. And following on from Stephanie's mention about it's great having technologies, but not much point if they're not being used. We came across a company 18 months ago that had spun out of Manchester University in the late noughties with an amazing technology, with a massive end market. But it's a great example of how to strategically mess up the development of a medtech company. And essentially, without offending people, this is the product, which is a compression stocking. Specifically, I mentioned earlier, scanned your leg to fit perfectly. And the problems this company had was that the technology was great. It converts a scan into a knitting pattern, which goes into a machine, and it comes out with this stretchy material, which fits perfectly. But the problem they had is the device was very expensive. So it was £25,000, the lens and the actual device they had to do. So it couldn't really be used very easily in the mass market. And then the other big strategic mistake they had, and perhaps that first one wasn't the fault, that was just the fact they were quite early. But the other big strategic fault they had was trying to develop the market themselves. So hiring one salesman to go out and try and sell this product, making to order. Whereas actually the potential market, and they were going after the sports market initially, because these devices, which I use them, they aid sports recovery for people by increasing the blood flow. But actually the much bigger market is the medical market. And the solutions people have in the diabetics, and particularly with foot ulcers and all that, is they either wear an off-the-shelf compression stocking, which is uncomfortable, and they don't wear it because it's always pinches in some area because everyone's a different shape. Or they have 4-layer bandaging, which is very time intensive and needs a lot of training, and nurses who bandage people up regularly to apply the right amount of pressure. So the mistake they had, the patents were running out, and they kind of came to us and said, help, what are we doing wrong? And we said, well, your patents are out of date. You need to refresh all the IP. And then you need to go and do a deal with a big medical company because they've already got the end customers and they're dying out for innovation in what's a commoditized market. So we didn't become shareholders. We just did a deal. We just structured a deal to turn this company around, filing new patents as we speak, and in discussions with some of the biggest medtech companies there are about them licensing this technology and taking it for use in the medical market, where it could have potentially a massive impact on people's lives. And then we're going to go off and do the sports market. And the other application is for airplanes. So when you travel on a plane, everybody should really wear compression stockings because of the threat of DVT, particularly in lower pressure environments in the air. But if you could go to the airport and before you get on a plane, just stand there and be scanned, and either then or potentially just post it to your house for the next trip, get a stocking to wear, which will be comfortable enough for a long haul flight, then that would, again, provide amazing value. So that's an example of an amazing technology that was perhaps before its time and didn't have the strategy behind it to get it to the mass market. And I think that has lessons for kind of a lot of people who've got ideas in medtech and how to solve solutions, whether it's digitally or otherwise, and think about, the difficult questions you have to ask yourself at the start of the process when you've got these ideas.
Yeah, I think time is always one of the more interesting points when it comes to medtech. There's been so many examples of companies that have developed, I'm looking at it all from my geek tech brain thinking that's so cool, let's do that, that's so cool. But a lot of the time it's just impractical. Like, it could be the coolest thing in the world, but if it has no practical market application, if you've not got the cost, the audience, and the necessity right, it's never ever going to work. And that's what I always find so interesting, especially in medtech, where it is, you look at the big winners at the minute, and you've got companies in the telehealth space, companies like Amwell and KRY, who have raised $3 billion between them, which is ridiculous. But it just goes to show the telehealth market is that big. You've then got the mHealth apps, and you mentioned this at the beginning, Toby, about how you can sort of get that competitive edge in cycling apps like Strava. And also mental health is really big at the minute as well. Headspace have just done another huge closing, a lot of money going into those solutions as well, which is great to see. I think it's an exciting time in digital health right now, very exciting, but I think there's always got to be a good market fit in place. Look, we're short on time here, so let's scrap the present. We're going to head to the future, do a bit of time traveling, and we're going to look ahead. Natalia, perhaps you can just share with us what you've talked a lot during this 45 minutes so far about. It's very early days. It's early days. There's going to be a lot proven in the next few years, particularly in drug discovery. What does the future look like? And I think in particular, what industries are crying out for medtech adoption and digital health adoption? What industries do you look at and think that's such a antiquated way of approaching it?
Okay, so I think when we are talking about AI and machine learning and all these technologies in drug discovery, I think we are just at the peak of the iceberg at this moment. I think it's going to be a total revolution in the next years. And particularly, we're not talking about traditional ways of making drug discovery, new ways of making drug discovery. I think the huge impact would be in not only one specific part of the process, for example, hit identification or something. I think it's the entire process which can be benefited for these technologies, because when we are talking about early stages and revolutionize the way of not testing thousands of compounds, so just making the ones that you believe that are going to be the most likely to be active against a particular biological target, there is a huge impact, not only in cost, in effectivity. So it's something like it's going to be very, very relevant in the next years. Also, when we talk about how to improve the drug across the drug discovery process, so we are generating data, and the more data we are generating, we can feed in the models in order to generate the next round of potential drugs that are even better from the initial one. So if we think about the later stages in drug discovery, there's still a huge potential on there. Even more when, for example, Stephanie was talking about the patients, we can then, with these precision medicines and these more understand better how the drugs interact in the patient's body, and then do this kind of stratification data depending on the patients, and then feeding again into the pipeline and then improve again all the process. So I think it's very difficult to see or to say where is a key area in this whole process, for example, of making drugs, because every single stage has the potential to implement AI technologies, machine learning technologies, in order to make the process more efficient. And if we think about the traditional ways of making drug discovery, they are still there. So it's something that is not that we are going to change completely the way of making drug discovery, is that we are going to complement and to improve and to support with new methods in order to give new solutions to these new therapeutic problems. So the way I can see the future is like combination of technologies where we use AI in these particular areas to get the solution that we're looking for, combined with the human expertise and the human input in order to deliver the best or the next generation of drugs in a very cost-efficient manner, and very, speeding up the process, because that's all about. I mean, it's all about generating medicines and having a great impact in the society. So I can't tell you one specific area. So I would say it's going to be across the different areas, combined with the human experience and expertise.
Absolutely, yeah. It's about how they can work together essentially to improve the lives of patients. Stephanie, using the power of clairvoyance, what do you think is going to be the hot thing outside, of course, of eye care, which is very hot?
Yeah, I know. Is there anything outside of eye care? Oh, yeah. I think when you mentioned it earlier, personalized medicine, for me that's the big thing. That's the really big opportunity. I think the other really exciting thing for me is more medicine that's led by patient symptoms, because now that we can capture symptoms from different groups of people and make sense of those using different big data analytics, I think that is really exciting, because I think soon we're going to move towards not just treating the disease and the biomarkers of the disease that we firmly know about, but we're going to be able to investigate the whole well-being of a person and find drugs and therapies that are targeting the symptom-based side of things and the side effects and all of that. I think that's really exciting, and I guess that takes us on to very similarly rare disease. That if you're able to connect up the data from different people who have random symptoms, and you're able to identify rare disease a lot earlier in those individuals through big data analytics and AI, that for me is going to be really exciting as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I think Prashant, chairman of O2h Group, ran a very, very exciting ChaiTime a few weeks ago on rare disease in particular. I think it was ChaiTime 17 or 18 maybe. I'd encourage everyone to check that out because it was a great discussion on that. Toby, where's the money moving at the minute in digital health? What do people want to invest in? What's bringing about the most interesting opportunities?
Well, I think at the moment there's a lot of money going into diagnostics, particularly around COVID. Obviously people trying to solve that problem. There's huge numbers of early stage companies raising seed rounds and etc. for diagnostics companies. We spent a lot of time working with a breath test one, so you didn't have to take swabs. There are people, way too many companies working on this potential solution for what won't necessarily be usable in the current pandemic. But so I think diagnostics is one, but I think connected to that is personal data. So we're all wearing kind of watches, and there are more and more wearables within the constraints of kind of GDPR and things like that. If we can, the more data that we share about our health just on a day-to-day basis, and you're kind of linking that to the cause of what might be causing health problems, and if things are infectious, kind of how things are spreading. For example, if we all had a watch on that was measuring our temperature and our heart rate, that probably would have been quite useful at the moment if people have access to that information. So I think in the longer run, it's quite exciting about what can be done in a properly managed way with mass kind of market for people's health data.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more on that point. I meet a lot of startups who have apps and solutions like my blood glucose monitor and that kind of thing. It's about inputting data. And they all say, yeah, we've got the freemium model, doesn't cost anyone. They just put their data in, they're able to keep a diary. And I always say to these people, you've heard the old adage, right? If somebody's not paying for something, they're not the customer, they're the product. Like if you download an app and it doesn't cost you anything. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the patient and the user backlash is. You've got to collect data in the right way. And that when somebody figures that out, when somebody figures out the please hand over all your medical data, will give you a great customer experience or something like that. For me, that's going to be the game changer. And I'm not sure anyone's done it yet, but there's still time. There's still time. We're going to look at closing out this session. Something that I always like to ask, and I know we have a lot of entrepreneurs that join these calls. We've got founders, founder. We've got three sort of founders, co-founders here. Toby, starting with you, what one piece of advice that you could give to somebody who's interested in starting their own digital health business?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say is think about whether your idea is protected. So if it's something you plan to patent, don't go and publish things and shout about it and talk to people unless it's under NDA, because otherwise your idea is in the public domain. But I would encourage you to do that, because you should go and talk to people, including investors. Lots of people will spare time for you to talk about your idea and the potential market problem, and they'll point out loads of negatives and problems. But it's better to know those at the start than know those when you start going to try and raise venture capital money, having plowed your life savings and stopped your job and things like that. So I would use kind of offers to go and talk to people about it, be self-critical. And the kind of final point to that, I would say, was work out whether you've got something that is a great technology, it's a great product or service, or is it actually a company? Because actually the company aspect, to be able to pay for all the infrastructure around a whole company, build your route to market, and all of that process of raising money, there's so much friction involved in raising money. Whereas actually, if you have a great idea, you can still make a lot of money by finding a good partner where they've got the existing infrastructure and network and need something like your technology. So I think you've got to ask those questions early on and consult with people before you kind of blindly just think, right, I'm going to do seed, Series A, B, IPO with this kind of what could be a very narrow product. So that's a slightly longer-winded answer than I was planning.
That's great advice. Great. Protect your IP and just define what you've got, define actually what it is and what the best route to market's going to be. Fantastic advice. Natalia, any advice?
Yeah, so I would say if you strongly believe in your idea, so my main advice would be surround yourself with a strong team who shares exactly your same passion. I think this is key for the success of a business or the success of an idea. And then I would say just make sure that you are different and you are bringing new ideas into the market, because it's a highly competitive space, and you just need to make sure that you are different and you are, generating this new space. But I think the team is key, it's critical.
Absolutely. Great advice. I think having people around you just to bounce ideas off of, act as a sounding board, is so important. And as I talked about with the plethora of mobile apps that say, yeah, we monitor your blood glucose, make sure you've got a USP. Like, don't just do what everyone else is doing unless you are sure and certain that you can do it better, provide better service, a better product, and that actually you're going to have a route to market there. So great advice. Thank you. Stephanie, all the important closing comments of today's webinar lie on your very capable shoulders. What advice could you give to somebody starting out? You're on mute.
I think it's absolutely vital to really listen deeply to patients and to doctors and to the administrators within a system, so that you're building not just what you want to build and what you think is a good idea, but what people actually want to use and what people actually want to buy. And finding that important point between those two is really, really vital, because in some ways you've really got to hold on to what you believe is right. I'm glad we didn't listen to all the advice that we received from doctors and patients and opticians, but actually by following our own gut instincts and in keeping those strong, but really being led as well by what the market wanted and finding that happy place in the middle, that's I think where the true value comes. So yeah, listen to patients, listen to doctors, don't be completely led. And if you think you're doing something clever, keep pushing it through under the radar.
Absolutely. Great advice again. Listen, make sure that your great idea is shared by more people than yourself. Make sure that people actually want it. It sounds simple. Thousands and thousands of people do not do it. They do not design their products, services, solutions with that one rule in mind. It's so important to get right. So important. Thank you to all the panelists for a great discussion today. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it in the audience. Really, really good session. I'm going to now hand things back over to Sunil, who will hopefully be telling us about the next ChaiTime. There's a bit of a look of dread on his face. Maybe he's not going to be telling us about that. Sunil, anything to share? You're on mute at the minute.
When I come on, it's generally the end of the session, but I just wanted to come on and say, look, it's been a really enjoyable session. Craig's done a fantastic job of chairing this and hosting this, and really thank you to Toby, Natalie, and Stephanie for coming on and making it a really interesting ChaiTime. I've learned a lot, and it's great having all three of you in our ecosystem somewhere. So appreciate that. Thank you very much. Our next chai time, Craig, I haven't decided what it is yet. So
Oh no. Well, look,
I have ideas. We are actually closing as a venture fund. We're closing 2 investments probably today or Monday. So I thought it would be a good idea once they're closed and in the public domain to bring on one or both of them onto one of the chai times to talk about their technologies in the therapeutic space. One's a spin out from Cambridge and one's from Dundee. So I thought one of those 2 would be good, or maybe both. So I'll leave a little bit of suspense there as to what our investments might be, and maybe we talk about that one in 2 weeks' time.
Great stuff.
I'll end it. It's 4 o'clock. I'm trying to keep. Everyone has lots of things to do. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in a few weeks' time.
One more closing comment. There were some questions we didn't quite get to. If you want to contact anyone on the panel today, connect with them on LinkedIn. They're all fascinating people who share a lot of good content. So I encourage all of the participants to reach out via LinkedIn and carry on these discussions. That's it. Sunil said it.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.